they didn't realize how difficult it was for them to put the things that we say to words. So a lot of people feel or sense the same things that we talk about here. But what we try to do here with the guests and what I try to do personally is to try to assist people in a way that when they're confronted with a conversation on these issues, that they can genuinely know how to kind of state our position. So I'm not trying to provide talking points specifically, but more so just trying to make people more comfortable about where it is a lot of the things that we talk about come from. Obviously, we oftentimes address issues that are very much in the news. They're very contemporary. They're happening, almost, on a continuous basis. And this past week was no exception. We had federal agents come into the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and raided one of the businesses there. And there's no reasonable explanation. I mean, even though they'll have paperwork that they'll file and offer their rationale or their explanation on why they're there. When you look at things in a real and honest perspective, you realize just how unfounded their rationale is for doing what they do. The bottom line is our territories are not part of New York State. The bottom line is our territories are not really even part of the United States, and they even say so. They even say so in their own documents that Canandaigua Treaty, which and again, I'm not a big fan of treaties, but when you read the language that they wrote, we didn't ask them to write this stuff. They approached us with these treaties, and when you look at what they've written, and they say that the United States will never claim our territories, and yet we're in a situation now where federal agents will believe they can have unfettered access, and of course it's not really unfettered because they'll come in with guns drawn. I mean, some of the pictures that are posted up on my Facebook group page, and if you go to Let's Talk Native with John Kane, the group page, you'll see a lot of the photos that took place, and you realize these guys have fingers on the trigger, and this business that they had gone into is right beside the community center for the Cattaraugus territory, right where our children are at play, where our children are getting a recreation. So with almost no regard for who we are, where they were, they come in as if they really have a legitimate right to be there. And at the end of the day, I know when this raid actually took place, the question was, well, why did they come? I know when most of the media outlets inquired, they assumed that there was some heinous crime that was being committed on the premises of this business. And when they found out that it was just about cigarettes, they said, so what's the story? And of course, when you ask where this raid is based, what is the rationale? They base it on certain federal laws, and among those federal laws is a law they call CCTA. It's the Contraband Cigarette Trafficking Act. And when they look, and again, we're not a part of these laws, and so when they write these laws, and they're written in such a way that they are geared towards the federal government's role in assisting the states from being undermined by organized crime, I guess, it's a little unclear. But what they're saying is that any product, and this is out of the CCTA's the language in this law. It basically says any product in a state that does not have a stamp on it, where a stamp is required, the federal government. And so you got state law, and then it gets into federal law. They said if it doesn't have a stamp in a state where a stamp is required, then the federal government can deem it as contraband. So even though for 30 years we've had tobacco products, including cigarettes, coming to our territories without a New York State stamp on it. In fact, New York State wholesalers were supplying us with this product. And they did it for 30 years. And all while they were doing it, the federal government was raking in the money because the federal excise tax was associated was on this stuff. But certainly not the state excise tax or the state sales tax. The state acknowledged, and they knew it, they acknowledged it, and they they never claimed that the excise tax was due on product that came to our territories. What they did claim, and this is the argument they've been making since 1990, was that if we sold a product on our territory to a non-native, that they had a right to assess a tax on that product. And you know what? We didn't argue that they didn't have that right. We just said they couldn't make us be the tax collector. That's all we said. For 30 years, that's all we've said. We've just said, you can't make us be the tax collector. Now, keep in mind, there have been some other cases out west, places that have not pushed the envelope the way Mohawks and Senecas do, places that have been a much more in line with federal policies, much more assimilated than we are here, that have had a harder time asserting what we assert here. And as a result of that, they had a couple of cases out west. They had one they call Moe and one they call Colville. And in those cases, they had a federal court that basically said, well, we believe that the state can place a minimal burden on tribes to collect taxes for the state. So a federal court has ruled that, not out here, not in the territories of the Haudenosaunee. I'm talking about in Blackfoot territory, and on Colville Reservation. So out west, federal courts have said that those tribes, and why those tribes? Well, because when they looked at those places, they did a breakdown and they looked at, well, how are those territories configured? And they determined that they were very checkerboarded. And by checkerboard I mean you could have a parcel that was considered part of the reservation and other parts that weren't. And as you drove down a street, it's not like you could clearly, in all areas, distinguish whether you were on a native territory or not. The other thing is, how was their land held? Well, one of the distinguishing characteristics of how our lands are held here in the territory of the Haudenosaunee is that we own the land. The federal government acknowledges it, the state government acknowledges it, and in fact, we own it in, to use a property term, we own it in fee. They suggest that we own it in restricted fee. And when I say they, I mean the state and federal government. Now the restriction, the only thing that they define as the restriction on our fee title is that we can't sell our land to the Soviet or to the Russians or to the Chinese. That if we sell our land, that somehow they have the first right of refusal, I guess. And that's what the United States assumes, that if we choose to sell our land, that we could only sell it to the United States. Now, I don't know that we've agreed to that. Of course, we've never wanted to sell our land in the first place. Most of the land transactions that have ever taken place have been really just acts of fraud. But again, the difference is, out west, the federal government has taken the title to all native lands, and then they reissue it in what they call as trust land. So they said, we're going to hold the title to your land, and we're going to hold that title, and it's there for your use and enjoyment. So there's a clear distinction between how lands are held in some of these other territories, including the ones associated with this Moe and Colville case. So there's a clear distinction on how we live, how our land is held, and it isn't just about our culture. It's about how much of this stuff we've been able to hang on to and how much we've been able to assert. Because all native territories, had the same position towards their lands. But not all have asserted it and stood strong on it as much as we have here. So clearly our land is held differently. So when these decisions were made out there, and a federal court says that a state could place a minimum burden on a minimum burden can be imposed upon them to collect tax of the state, that never held over here. So New York State's only choice was to try to shut off what they could control was New York State wholesalers. So they finally, after 25 years, managed to clear enough legal hurdles to say to New York State wholesalers, we're not going to let you sell unstamped product to native retailers anymore. And in fact, what they kind of had to say is, we're still going to let you sell untaxed product for natives' use and consumption, but we're not going to let you sell them product that they can turn around and sell back to our people. I mean, that's what the state said. Of course, the circumstance that it is now is we simply get nothing from New York State wholesalers anymore. And that's where this whole thing with CCTA comes in. Because now, after 30 years of being in this business, after 30 years of having remarkable innovations when it comes to how we sell and market this product, and I realize that cigarettes are not the most politically correct product in the world anymore, but they still have trust me, the tobacco lobby in Washington, the tobacco lobby in New York State, they still have just as much juice as they ever had. In fact, they've used their will in Washington and in Albany to basically turn on us. Even when we were marketing their products exclusively, they were right in our corner. In fact, they were paying tens of thousands of dollars for shelving contracts. They were paying all kinds of money to our people. But once we started producing our own brands, because we saw the handwriting on the wall, we knew at some point the state, and because we saw the arguments that were made in Moe and Colville, we saw the arguments that were made in the Attia case. And one of the clear distinctions that they always had to say is that New York State's attempt to collect a tax on a product that we're only bringing into our territories to avoid state tax with the intent of selling to their residents, that they have a right to interfere with that chain of custody. But in all three of these federal cases, Moe, Colville, and Attia, they say, but that is markedly different than imposing a tax on a product that we add value to, that we somehow are engaged in. And I'm not just saying manufacturer. When I say add value to, it could be a product that is marketed as a native product. It could be something we import from one native territory to another. But something where it's a native-to-native transaction that brings a product to our territories for sale. And so when they created this Contraband Cigarette Trafficking Act, they put these blanket definitions of what they would call contraband. Now, what's not in this blanket definition, and this is part of the thing that really concerns me, because even though most of our territories have moved away from the national brands, not because we felt that we had to, and not that we felt that the United States or New York State or anybody else had a legal right to tell us we couldn't. The reason we moved away from the national brands was because of what Philip Morris and Lorillard and R.J. Reynolds and all these companies did when they tried to stick a fork in us. So most of our refusal to sell that product was out of essentially a protest, if you will, or a boycott on those products. Now, there was never any real concession that we would never carry that product, but we were not going to be the whipping boy for Philip Morris anymore. But the problem that I have with the CCTA is there's no distinguishing from a native brand from a national brand. So what was at the core and at the basis of this raid that took place on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation was them trying to say that the CCTA could characterize a national brand of tobacco coming to our territory without a New York State stamp on, something that's happened for over 30 years, but they could now characterize that as contraband. Now, if that definition holds up in their law, then they have an easy time making that definition stick to a native brand, whether it's Seneca's or whether it's Signals or whether it's Natives or whether it's Herons or whether it's Pride or no matter whose brand, whatever native brand it is. If they are successful in executing what they've done to Will Perry and what they keep alleging they're going to do to Tonawanda and other places, if they are successful in executing this, there's nothing to stop them from trying to interfere with native-to-native trade. And so we have to we don't have to wait, we can't wait until we get to that point to draw the line in the sand. We got to draw the line now, and we need to make noise about it now. Look, I've overstepped my first 15 minutes, so we're going to take a break and come right back. And I might even let some guests speak in the next session. So this is John Kane, this is Let's Talk Data. We'll be right back. You knew I could talk that long without taking a breath. Chance there to do a little plug. My good friend Shirley Snyder from on Tonawanda Reservation asked me to make an announcement. I made it last week, but I'm going to do it again. The Tonawanda Reservation Historical Society presents its 14th annual exhibit, and that's going to be next Saturday, October 13th. It's at the Tonawanda Indian Community House. That's 372 Bloomingdale Road in Akron. It's from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's free admission. They're going to have traditional foods. They're going to have a Chinese auction. They're going to have a lot of things on display. It's usually a good time. It's a nice community event. So if you are looking for some place to drive to next weekend, by all means, take the opportunity to go out to Tonawanda and check out their historical exhibit, their annual exhibit they do there. It's a good time. So by all means, do that. And if you see Shirley there, tell her John Kane sent you. All right. I've got pretty much everybody bellied up to the bar here. I've got Matt Hill, I've got Paul Delarone, I've got Ross John and Ed Schindler. First off, I want to thank you guys for all making the trip. Don't all say you're welcome at once, but somebody say something. No? All right. I know, Paul, you just made it in, so you're the only one who came from a long ways to get here. And you and I are going to take a trip tomorrow. We're going to head down to see our friends down in North Carolina. And that's always. I know anytime you and I have made that trip, it's. I know you go there a lot more often than I do, but I'm always impressed at how well received we are when we get down there. It's like they don't even care what they've heard about us.
Because I'm nice.
Well, I'm nice most of the time. Look, I yelled one time when I was down there, but it wasn't at them; it was at others. But anyway, I know we're helping them. They've been facing a lot of challenges on things like hunting and fishing, and I know you've actually gone down and testified in one of their court hearings for on behalf of Kendall Locklear. Yeah. And one of the things that I understood that the judge had said is they have no problem with recognizing their sovereignty, especially as it relates to this hunting and fishing. But they wanted to be able to distinguish who's Tuscarora and not Tuscarora. And so that's part of what we're going to do. We're going to try to help them with a little bit of their IDs, show them a little bit more of what the hood initially red card was about and that kind of thing, and help them reconfigure something for themselves.
Yeah. They haven't had any experience or knowledge in any of this stuff. And, they've asked for help and that, and they've been up here in the north of the Confederacy, and they've been asking for this guidance and help and so on, and people have just not stepped up to the plate for whatever the reasons and that. But I've been dealing with these people for well over 12 years, but I've been back and forth down there for almost 20. And so one of the last meetings I was at, they were trying to solve this problem of theirs, and so I offered a suggestion is that I would bring them samples of like our birth certificates, marriage certificates, and the ID cards, and I told them that not telling them that this is what they have to use, but here's something that could give them a better idea of how to put this together for themselves. But clearly marking that this is them, and that that they're not representing anybody else but themselves. And so, and I also committed you to help them with some of the wording,
because I don't just talk, I write too.
Yes, you're right. And I don't know how to write, so.
Yeah, but you're still real good with the talking thing.
Well, it's called BS.
All right, and Ross, I know that things are obviously you're here from Cattaraugus, as Matt and Ed are, but things are really heating up with the political season. The Seneca Nation election is coming up on the second, same as the non-native elections. It's the second Tuesday, or first Tuesday of November.
November 6th.
November 6th. Okay. I don't know how much is really at stake in the election. As much as, and in fact, I'm never sure in an election how much is really at stake. I think what's really at stake, and you and I've talked about this in the past, is trying to create a better opportunity for the Seneca people to be more engaged in what takes place, and not just in governance necessarily, but in all facets of life. I think the thing that bothers me the most, as far as from a Mohawk living in Cattaraugus and seeing what's transpired under this previous administration or the current administration, is that there's been a real effort to try to institutionalize everything and try to come up with a Seneca Nation solution where the Seneca Nation is separate from the people. And I know you and I have talked, and everything from these federal raids to the floor tax issue to so many things that are facing the people, the Seneca people. I don't know how there is any strength in dealing with any of those issues if the people are kind of put to the back seat on this thing.
There isn't, and I think that's the thing that we're trying to bring to the table. I mean, some of us anyways, and hoping that that is exactly what's at stake. People are, they're jockeying for positions, for council this and council that, and my questions back to those that are running are basically, what are you going to do different? Do you understand the mechanisms out there that have kind of dragged us in a direction that we're in right now, and do you understand that it's not going to, there's no savior.
There's no silver bullet.
There's no silver bullet.
Exactly.
There's no one person or no one organization that's going to do it for us. We're going to have to do it together. If there's a savior, it's us as a people, that where we start sitting down. But you see it, and I think now this is the first, at least Seneca election that we've had where people are starting to recognize and talk that way. So I encourage that way, because even like the rates, things are going on. You have Dickey and these guys from ATF and agencies, and people are making their pleas to him. That's not our diplomacy. That's not our diplomacy.
And it should be over his head.
Yes.
That's above his pay grade to be trying to negotiate any kind of terms on our territory.
Sure.
And I think the raids do give a symbol of just how aggressive the federal government has been on our territories, and not just here in Cattaraugus, but in Tonawanda and other places. And I've said this before. We've never seen this level of federal aggression on our territories, at least not in our lifetime. We've had knockdown dragouts with the state, but we've never had the federal government trying to do so much.
I want to say something, and I believe it's related. I could be wrong. Is that, like you said earlier, I've never seen as much institutionalization in the Seneca Nation before, where we're going back to the state and the federal government and agencies and saying, look, leave us alone, because we parroted your system. And that's the thing I think that a lot of people are, we're starting to see it as a weakness. Some of us have seen it from a weakness from the beginning, but now more and more people are starting to wake up to it and saying, all we are is kind of bringing their system that fails for them time and time and time again. And we try to parrot it.
Now, and I know that we've had this conversation a number of times about when we speak of these things, and we offer that there may be that somehow we've got to take a step back, and maybe we've got to consider a little bit more of who we are as Haudenosaunee, as Seneca, Onondaga, Gunyakahaga. Oftentimes what we get, and Matt, you get the same thing back to you, is that, well, you guys are a little bit idealistic. You're not really understanding the complexities of dealing with the federal government. You're not really understanding just what and I'm sorry, but I understand the complexities. In fact, I may understand them a little bit more better than some of the rest of you guys in the room. I've been at various levels of the federal government.
I think it's important to realize that there's two